My name is Andrew Sullivan. I am a product manager here in the Bay Area out of Sunnyvale for G Suite Security. And I'm joined by Pascal, Ryan, and Red. Pascal?
Hello, everybody.
Yep.
Hello, everybody. My name is Pascal Dalla, and I've been working at Veolia for 2 years and a half. My role is head of technology office. The team basically deals with cybersecurity, software asset management, enterprise architecture, and design authority. Veolia, just a few words about it. It's a large group company, 160,000 people are working there, and we are focusing basically on 3 major businesses: water distribution, waste recycling, and energy.
Hey guys, I'm Ryan from Casper, the Director of IT. We oversee all corporate IT, retail IT as well. A little bit about Casper. We are a disruptor in the mattress industry, direct-to-consumer through e-commerce, and recently brick and mortar. And usually when, at Casper at least, what we do is when we introduce a new person, we do a fun fact. So I'm going to just do a fun fact. If you don't mind.
Fun fact.
I'm originally from Brooklyn, and I play drums in a hardcore band.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Red. I'm from Globe Telecom. I'm actually from the Philippines. Globe Telecom is right now is the leading telecommunication in the Philippines. From wireless to wired to all types of telecommunication services. We're also venturing in entertainment system solutions right now, including esports and YouTube and everything else. I work as a digital workplace manager in Globe for about 6 years now, almost 6 years. And we've been a G Suite customer for that long period of time as well. We're trying to explore GCP, and yeah, I'd love to share more details to you guys later.
Great. Thanks very much, Red. Could we advance a slide, please? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Oops. There it is. So quick reminder, you've probably seen this in previous sessions. We are using Dory today. So if you have a question, please feel free to add it to the Dory as we go throughout the conversation, and we'll bring up some of the top questions at the end of the session today. Sam, my esteemed colleague here, is actually leading that effort, and you'll hear from him. Or save your questions for the end, and we'll bring him back on the mics. So question for y'all. How many of you are G Suite admins today? OK. Right. Yes. My test account at the very least. Great. So I expect you'll have some good questions for this audience, or good questions for this panel. I would love to start this conversation by learning a little bit more about our worldwide panel's environment. So starting with you, Pascal, can you tell us about your environment and how you're using G Suite today, how many users you support, what does a day in the life look like for you as an administrator, and thinking about that, what's the biggest or most unique security problem that you face?
So basically at Veolia, the G Suite story started in 2012. Basically, we did a study at that time because we wanted to challenge the solution we had, which was Microsoft Office. So we did that study. It didn't take so much time to realize that we have to move to G Suite. So it started in 2013 with whole core services, basically. So we did a massive rollout in all our business units. Just for information, we have like 60 business units all over the world. So as I said before, it's 160,000 people, so all are concerned about that, even though we don't have so many, I would say, user accounts, around 100,000. So we have 3 major concerns at that time, which were 2-step verification. We wanted to roll out accounts with the 2-step verification because we are massively using single sign-on, and all our solution basically rely on the strength of Google identity. So it's mandatory for us to have a single sign-on in place and 2-step verification. And the third point is also a tool that we have developed, which is called DIMA for Digital Identity Management. It's basically related to all our accounts and the life cycle of our employees when they get into the company, when they move, when they... Yeah, so it's the whole challenge that we had to face at that time. And as for the administration, we are currently doing something what we call our technical depth, but we will talk about that maybe a little bit later. And the idea behind it is that since we massively rolled out all those services, we didn't pay so much attention at G Suite security at the beginning, so now we have to, let's say, get rid of this technical debt, and we can detail this in a few minutes.
So at Casper, we've got approximately 600 to 700 people, far less than both Red and Pascal here. But that said, they're dispersed throughout the world. We have offices in Berlin, Toronto, New York, and San Francisco, as well as stores all throughout domestic US, some in Canada as well. So supporting all those users gets a little difficult. I would say the biggest thing or the difficulty that we run into is, as a retail company, with holidays, you have to hire, and then there's a lot of attrition in retail. So a lot of user accounts get provisioned and then quickly deprovisioned. So being able to turn those accounts over quickly is very critical for us, which we've been able to use G Suite for. Aside from that, we use all the core G Suite functionality, such as Drive, Docs, things like that, to collaborate with all of our users in real time. Previous to that, we were using Office 365, which is okay. But when you're trying to collaborate in a last-minute presentation for a board meeting, it gets very difficult in PowerPoint. So Slides makes that a bit easier. Past that, a day in the life of myself, I think we're covering that at this bullet point, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, a day in the life for us is we have IT stand-up in the morning, starting with meditation. It's 5 minutes. The team looked at me like I was crazy when we started, but honestly, it's super helpful just to get in a good mindset for the madness that will ensue throughout the rest of the day. So we start off with our SLAs. We go through our roadmap for the quarter, for the year, to make sure we're all adhering to the due dates that we've agreed to. Meetings galore, as I'm sure everybody can attest to, with all the different cross-functional partners that we have to ensure that we're all aligned on the rapidly moving targets of the business. And let's see, unique security, I think I just already mentioned that with the attrition in retail, so that's about it.
So with Globe, we're actually about almost 18,000 employees. We're scattered across the Philippine Islands. That's about 7,107, depending on the tide, whether it's low rise or rising or low tide. But we've been a G Suite customer for about 6 years now, and as I mentioned earlier, we're using quite heavily on G Suite, specifically on productivity, Drive. We've subscribed to unlimited storage and all. Within those 17,000 workforce, majority of them, if not, actually no, it's about probably around 9,000 regular employees. The other are temporary employees. So with that in mind, that would be our security concerns as well, because we have a unlimited storage of data, and at the same time, we're scattered everywhere. With that, since we're scattered, a lot of our concerns mostly in our devices and our identity, and making sure it's self-service in terms of troubleshooting all of these things, and we were able to help rather fix that through MDM, G Suite MDM, and it's quite weird because those that are not within our head office are actually the more people. They are the most to adapt quickly rather than the ones in the head office. Probably because they've become self-reliant and making sure that they're follow instructions and all these things. So I guess that's like a day in a life. I've been working for Globe for 6 years, and I'm handling apps and devices. So every employee apps and employee devices goes through me in terms of the approval, in terms of the roadmaps and all of those requirements. So we've been trying to move everything to the cloud and also to mobile first. So that's what I do every day, and also coordinate with our security team. We have our command center, which basically monitors all our network traffic. Specifically, we're handling one of the largest network infrastructure in the Philippines. So yeah.
Great. So thinking about this environment based on your own experience, there's a few things I'll follow up on, but I'll ask the big question first, which is, if you're a G Suite admin, what is one thing you should do right now to improve your security? And we'll start with you, Pascal.
Well, as a cybersecurity officer, I would say when you roll out Google service, whatever G Suite service, you have to think about the best compromise between the basic experience, user experience, and security risks. So what does it mean? If you don't do that, what's going to happen, you will generate what we call a big technical debt. I'll give you some figures, because as I mentioned before, when we started to roll out massively our G Suite services, we pay attention at user first. And we said, okay, we want the best experience for them, because we have also to convince that it was the best choice that we did. But we didn't take care so much about security at that time. Okay, so now what we realize is that, I give you some figures. We have, for instance, 1,400 Google groups without any manager or owners. So it means we have no idea about the spams for those groups, for instance. We have over 100 domains, internal domains, which are not compliant related to anti-spoofing. So we have to work about that. We have also some figures related to pop IMAP. We have 1,000 users who still beneficiate from this service. So the idea behind it, if I give you those figures, is that this huge technical debt, we have to solve that. So the best way to do it is, of course, when you start, is to put in place some KPIs, automatic ones. Because then you put a process and you're able to trace all what's going to happen and the evolution about those services. Again, with a company like ours, a large-scale company, you've got to do that. Otherwise, everything's going to be under control, out of control, sorry. And one other point is also to take the good measure to put the risk under control. And this is what we've been doing now for quite some months. And it's hard and very painful to go to business units and to say, could you please justify why you're still using this pop IMAP, which if you don't have any business reasons, you're not supposed to use that anymore, at least from a user perspective. So it's a long, long journey. But one also point I would mention here, which is quite essential, is to do it little by little. I know it takes quite a while, but if you think that you are going to solve everything at once, it is not going to work. So think about this. The best compromise between user experience and security risk. Put KPIs, automatic ones, and take action and measure, and put this process in place in order to have another view about that.
Pascal, I'd like to follow up on that a little bit. You talked about using KPIs to measure progress. Can you talk a little bit how you use our tools, or perhaps home-built tools, to monitor those KPIs and keep an eye on risk?
Yes. It's true. We've been using also a security center, like dashboards, built-in dashboards, quite useful. Of course, we have developed also some what we call productivity tools in order to check a few things that we didn't have natively with Google. We're also using investigation tool, which is a quite powerful tool where we could do some requests in order to have some figures, as I mentioned before. We've been using also tools like email log search, also to confirm that there's some traffic going in some SMTP relays, for instance, all those kinds of things. So it's both a compromise between the native tools that Google could provide and also the tools that we have developed.
Great, thank you. Ryan.
Sure. So I would say two-step verification, two-factor authentication, day one. Turn it on. Super important, especially if you're a larger company or a company of interest or a disruptor. You know, Casper becomes a target for many of our competition. So we want to make sure that we are taking the steps to mitigate as many malicious attacks as possible. Two-step verification is a great way to start doing that. Past that, incident management protocols, super important. You don't really think of a plan of action when something goes wrong until something goes wrong. And by then it's too late and you're just operating on adrenaline and it just turns into a big mess. You know, speaking from experience, I've done that before and learned a lot. Being able to figure out the course of action, the parties that need to be notified, the notification schedule, having templates of information that you're sending out to the team, with some variables that you're changing, obviously, so you're not reinventing the wheel or writing an entirely new email every time you deal with a security issue. I find that super important. In addition to that, a change advisory board is super helpful when you're looking to implement changes. Having an established change advisory board with influencers in the company, senior leadership, you want those people involved, so when you do recommend changes, they are vetted properly, and then they become essentially the people who are, what's the word? I can't, championing the change for you. So when it comes from the top down, it's adopted much quicker by the end user.
Follow-up question for you, Ryan. We talk a lot about security keys. We're very proud of the fact that security keys can help you reduce the risk of phishing, reduce the risk of account hijacking. Sometimes security keys have a perception of being difficult to use. How did you overcome that perception among your user community?
That's a tough one. So we're still rolling out security keys to our fleet, but we do have a group of outsourced contractors as well as our retail teams that are using security keys on a daily basis. Now, for new users who aren't familiar with the protocols of the company, super easy. You just give them a security key and tell them this is what you do. But when it's a user who's used to how it was before, it gets a little bit more difficult. Explaining to them the benefits of utilizing security keys for two-step authentication. There are other methods of the two-step authentication as well. Obviously through your phone, Google Authenticator, there are third parties that do it too. But security keys, I find, is a great first step of that two-factor authentication. Not everybody's going to be keen on carrying something around with them all the time. So having the backup of a phone for that verification process is helpful. But we are working on it on the corporate side for sure.
Great, thank you. Red, what's the one thing every G Suite admin should do to improve their security?
Oh, look at it end to end. I guess it's more of, because my role actually looks at devices and applications, so it's more of I can have a end-to-end visibility with how the user experience is. I guess it's really more of that. So create a roadmap, have a specific solution, each of the points that you have to consider, from the login experience to multi-factor authentication to MDM, up until to the SSO that you've implemented to your application. So it's something that we've been working on over the last 4 years, and we're trying to make sure that we have that in place. Also, I'd like what you said earlier. I think that's true. If I'm going to add something what Ryan said earlier. Have probably a change management board, and at the same time, something to do with our security posture right now. Since we're a telco, we have to comply with our version of GDPR, which is DPA. We utilize the DPA to make sure that we have fundings if we need to put more, security layers on top of what we have right now. So, yeah, use what you have, and also make sure you have that roadmap in place.
What's the name of the regulation again?
DPA, so Data Privacy Act.
The DPA. Can you comment a little bit about how you do your audits for DPA and how you use tools from us as well as your own home-built tools for that?
So we have plenty of tools that we're using, from third-party solutions to native Google solutions such as Security Center, from both GCP and also with G Suite. But more so, we also have our internal teams who's building not really sophisticated, but more of automating that flow from using Splunk to different third-party solutions. We usually we have incidents, security incidents that we can actually use Security Center to make sure we check all the steps and also track the user's usage in a sense. And that's how we utilize the G Suite Security Center, more of the alerts as well. Actually, earlier today, I received an alert from Security Center stating that this specific account has been probably be a phishing account whatsoever. But apparently, one of our part of a security command center team was actually testing that functionality. That's abuse@globe.com.ph. So basically, it sends an alert to everyone if we notice some sort of an abuse for SMTP, Relay, or for any other activity.
Cool, got it. Great, thank you. So thinking about best practices, I'm going to ask additional best practice questions, but what are some of the pitfalls or blind spots or trouble spots that you run into, and how were you able to overcome them in the last few years?
Well, I start.
Yes.
I keep on to respect the order.
Yes, we don't have to go in order. We can go in a different order, by the way. This is, here, Ryan, why don't you start?
Okay.
We got to change it. It's a little too orderly.
So I'm confused now.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, my initial answer was we haven't really run into too many issues. You know, fingers crossed, all those things crossed. I'm sure as soon as I said that, the place is on fire back in New York. But one thing that we've run into is user authentication. Not two-factor, nothing like that, but third-party services. So a lot of people still use usernames and passwords for a service that is not directly related to G Suite. The great thing about this, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, this is what happens when you put me on the spot, is using the native SSO services from G Suite to link that application or service into G Suite so it authenticates through that, mitigating the need for a username and password. Sometimes provisioning the user automatically and deprovisioning them automatically. That has alleviated a lot of headache across the company where people were either forgetting their usernames or passwords or just signing up for services they shouldn't be and gaining access to services that they shouldn't be.
Pascal?
Okay. So at Veolia, we faced nearly 2 years ago, I think it was in May 2017, a large-scale phishing attack directed at basically Google customers. So as a classical phishing attack, the users received an email from an attacker who pretended to be a contact of them. And it was basically a link to an application which falsely claimed to be a Google Doc. And by this phishing link, it was supposed to access to user account in order to basically steal all contact information. And then the idea behind it was to send again this message to all the contacts and so on. So Google did its job, disabling all the links, removing the login page and so on. So what we have learned from that basically is that, first of all, we can use the customized settings from Google. We have some that we have applied at the domain level, like identifying links behind the shortened URLs, for instance. It's a little bit technical, but it's one feature you could put. Also related to scan linked images, things like that. And also some warning prompt. When you click on a link that goes to an untrusted domain, then all of a sudden pops up a warning, which is quite efficient as well. So those are basically the tools that Google can provide and you can put in place. The second part I would mention is I come back to a point that Ryan already talked about, is related to security keys. So security keys, it's probably today the best second step verification method that we have against phishing, better than prompt, authenticator, and so on. So I mentioned before that it was one of the key points for Veolia at that time in 2013. Even though we have evolved and the users, we recommend that they use prompt, we have a very sensitive population, which are our super-admin accounts. So we have the G Suite super-admin accounts, we have the GCP super-admin accounts, we have all the cloud platform super-admin accounts, and the third population is also all super-admins related to SaaS solution that we have integrated in our environment. I mentioned like for CRM, HR, payroll, and so on, and we have very sensitive information. So what we've done so far, we have identified those population, and we started to actually create a dedicated G Suite account. Needless to mention that some of them were using their regular accounts in order to do some sensitive action, but I'm sure Veolia is not the only company between us. So we started to roll out security keys. So pay attention to one point, and maybe we can talk about that again later. The security now that has been provided by Google, the Titan key with the Bluetooth mode is very user experience, very good as user experience. And nobody can claim that they have an issue because the security cannot be introduced in their Chromebooks or other devices and so on. It does not work anymore since it works contactless, so which is quite good. And the last point is, don't give in to people who come to you and says, "Oh, you will laugh, but today I have forgotten my security key. You know, it was much easier with prompt or SMS. You know, I always have my telephone with me." And I tell them, "But when you go shopping, you take your credit card, don't you? And if you just forget once your credit card, the second time, I'm sure you won't forget it." And it's the same with the security key, and this is what we have been doing.
Yeah, on our end,
Red.
it's
Yeah.
we have two things actually. One is MDM, and the other one was SSO. So about probably 3 years ago, so we've started the venture of trying to introduce MDM to our employees. The thing is, we were kind of having hesitation from them, specifically because it's going to be, on their device. First question was, are you going to check my personal files or all of these things? They're more conscious, and that's good. They're more conscious of what happens to their accounts. But it took them a while to realize that it's better to have the MDM in place rather than not. So there was an event, 3 years ago. One of the guys, actually one of the top guys in Globe, lost their phones while they were in Barcelona. So they're doing the MWC event. So, and they were there, and the first thing that they did is actually they contacted me, and it was like nighttime here in Manila at the time, and I had to do something, and I told them, did you enable MDM on your end, or were you able to set it up? And they said yes, and I said, yeah, good thing, because we were able to lock down the phone whatsoever, and that made actually he was the one who championed the MDM across Globe. So because of that experience. And we kind of made sure that everyone knew about what happened. And in the leader circle, they were very well aware of what's going to happen if they don't turn on their MDM on their phones. The second one was the SSO. So right now, it is actually because of the roadmap that we have for the experience. People are now focusing on all their applications. Like they want to have their SSO experience across all, and they want Google Login there, because before Google Login, we have our own internal solution that was supposed to be doing that functionality, but because of probably it's an old one, and it's not something that was able to accommodate all the functionalities that we requested. They're having a hard time logging in, or rather integrating their application to that solution. So it was something that we wanted to push forward. So right now, all of our software as a service solutions, they're all using Google Login. And since then, we haven't experienced any account compromise or whatsoever. We just made sure that everyone gets 2FA at the onset, and we disabled those things that should be disabled. Like for example, IMAP and POP3 disabled at the start of the account itself, or creation of the account.
That's a common theme, disable IMAP and POP3. You can do that with one checkbox, by the way.
Yeah.
I noticed that both Ryan and Red, you were talking about enabling single sign-on to third-party services using Google Cloud Identity. Were there some barriers or problems you had to overcome when you did that with either user resistance or difficulty with the services?
No.
No? Great.
Because I guess
that.
everyone's familiar with Google Login, so it's like they're using it in their own personal accounts. I guess what we did so that it's gonna be it was easy for them was to emulate how they do it in their own accounts, and that same way, once we enabled, for example, 2FA in the SSO, they wanted to do it as well on their own personal accounts. So even we were able to influence them and made sure that they're well aware of security risk on their own space. So yeah.
Well, I noticed a couple cases where your end user was a security advocate. Your end user said, hey, I was able to improve my security on my own account, or in the other case, your implementation of MDM was able to save me a security risk personally. So was that a case where they were able to actually be an advocate outside their own, throughout the organization?
Yes. Also, for some weird reason, these guys are, we're treating them as babies as well. So, I mean, we want to make sure, and that's one of the mantra actually of Globe Telecom, we want to make sure that our employees are being treated properly. So instead of just telling them exactly what to do, we're trying to influence them as well, that they have to do it on their own personal space too. So for example, there were cases before where in Facebook accounts, not even Google accounts, Facebook accounts on their own personal space got compromised. And we told them to enable 2FA as well. So it's not really about just Google and whatsoever, it's about security posture across all. So at the end of the day, user, whether it's a personal space or company space, would have the same security risk, right? So yeah.
Great. Okay, next question. We wanted you to share some tips and tricks. Things that are things that you do that make your management experience with Google Admin better, or that save you time while administering G Suite security.
You wanna?
Sure, Red. Yeah, Red. You start this time.
Well, keep it simple. What we're doing is go for the native ones. If we're not satisfied with it, then we go to automate it and to get third-party solutions. But as much as possible, we want to go for the native solutions and try to lock as soon as possible before we can. For example, is that with the IMAP and POP3, at the onset we had to disable it, and not just on G Suite level, but on the network level. So even if the administrator, mistakenly turned on the IMAP and POP3, there are certain floors in the building that's really locked down across all, so you cannot use your IMAP and POP3. Also, in terms of, I guess, you have to make sure you use your templates. I like what you're saying earlier. We do that as well in Globe because we have a different security team. We call them ISDP, so Information Security and Data Privacy Team. And our team is a Systems and Information Systems Group. So basically, we work hand in hand with them. So there are operations, and at the same time, they maintain the policies. But we're more on focusing on the solutioning and implementation of the solution. So as I mentioned earlier, the templates that we guys collaborated with, it was easy for us to give awareness to our employees, to the point that probably they're sick of our awareness already in terms of templates and use cases and whatsoever. But it was helpful for us to, veer them away from the usual to more of a higher security posture. Yeah.
And tell me a little more. When you say security templates, what do you mean?
For example, when you have new hacker news or whatever issues, we have a template already that we can already use to communicate fast. That's one. To announce like new upgrades or functionalities. That's two. The third one would be in terms of requesting for security, like for example, for SSO, you have to create a project in GCP. You have to integrate it with a project, right? For you to use the admin APIs of Google, you have to request it in a manner wherein you have to explain what these applications would request. So I would use the APIs for. So what we do is to create that template, make sure that they file it properly to us, and it's a collaborative template actually. So all of our security personnel would be able to go through that template and give their advice whether we go through it with it or not. So mostly on that one.
Yeah, as for Veolia, I would say 3 major pillars, and that's trip and tricks. SSO, we mentioned it, MDM. Yeah, with the basic ones inside, like pin codes, screen logs, and all that stuff. And again, two-step verification. And again, you really have to carry on with this, which is very important, as we mentioned before. Otherwise, you can explain to your user that they will have to change their password on a very, very, very regular basis, which can be a pain in the neck. So, but maybe a tip to maybe roll out more broader this kind of two-step verification is, first of all, to start with a scope that you have under control, people that you know, some or two key players that you have, and you start to discuss with them. If they are influent, you can go and have meetings with their team, explaining why it's the best way to do it, and start to elaborate a clear and understandable process. Like you identify the population, you distribute your keys, You spend some time with some users trying to set up the keys within their accounts. And I mentioned before the super admin accounts. What you do is, and it's now available within Google, you say that this two-step verification is security key and only security key. And the second point is that you do not tip not trusted device. It means that each time they log in, they have to play the security key, no other choice. So this is really, really great for those sensitive accounts. So again, I mean, it's really basis, but it has to be implemented in order to enforce security.
What I notice here is that, yeah. what I notice here is this is as much about process and about putting together an organizational approach that gets people involved in securing their own devices rather than just using the technical solutions.
Well, it is correct. I mean, again, at large-scale company like ours, but I guess it's also a good playground. Even with smaller company, there is no other choice. I mean, if you don't do that, then it's going to be a total mess. I mean, I don't see any option if you don't have a clear process, understandable process.
I couldn't agree more. Ryan?
Yeah, to elaborate a little bit more on what Pascal mentioned earlier, service accounts for everything, anything that requires an admin login or account to do something administratively, have a service account for it. Don't tie it to a personal account. And then continuing along those lines, Team Drives is great. Google Team Drives allows you to It's here for Google Team Drives.
Applause for Team Drives.
All right.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, so should drop the mic on that. So yeah, Google Team Drives is great because it allows you to remove the actual file from being attached to a particular user. A user leaves the company, those files don't go with them. Although there are methods of getting around that, Team Drives is a great tool that we are starting to implement across the entire company to great success. Past that, automate as much as you can. There are so many things that we need to do as administrators. It's very tedious work, and as you scale, I mean, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm sure everybody else on the stage knows far more better than I do about this. But those processes start to scale when you multiply them by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. It just becomes a nightmare. So automate. Google App Script, fantastic tool. We use that for onboarding and offboarding. So our HR teams are able to enter information, the relative name for the user, the manager of the user, the start date, if it's a contract, or the end date. And then it kicks off automation, sending calendar events to the hiring manager, creating the actual accounts. We use a third-party tool called Better Cloud, which is a fantastic one that integrates very tightly with G Suite that allows us to kick off workflows or automation. So it'll work with Slack, et cetera, and just create all the accounts we need for day one when that user starts. Very little interaction from our part. And then conversely, when they leave, same situation. It
Deprovisioning?
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yes, deprovision.
Deprioritize, maybe not. No, deprovision.
Deprioritizes that for my workload because it's automated. But yeah, it removes everything and just makes life a lot easier and ensures there's no user error there. So automation, huge thing.
Really appreciate that with the automation. Who here uses AppScript on a regular basis? Okay, cool. Definitely want to highlight that. I want to make sure to allow some time for questions. So my last question to y'all, how are we on the Dory? Quite a few questions on the Dory. Excellent. So my last question, you've been looking at the Dory? Excellent. My last question for y'all is, what new security controls are you looking forward to coming from G Suite that we don't have yet?
Well,
especially ones in beta.
Looks like you have
Yeah.
Well, first two are the DLP, but we know it's coming because data loss prevention. As long as you know at your company what a sensitive data means, then it's great to use such a tool. But the first thing is to define what the sensitive data is, which is the first problem. So, but it can be quite powerful once you have such a tool. The second one is related to maybe more mobility, and we have such a project within our company. Secure anytime, anywhere, any device. It means mobility everywhere. And I'm talking about context-aware access. And you can authorize some people to access according to a certain context to some resources. And this is also a very great tool that we've been assessing for a while. And now Andrew starts my shopping list. So actually, we faced an issue which is called API control. We would like to get more granular control related to APIs versus domain-wide delegation. I said before that we try to integrate more SaaS solution, and those solutions, they tend to consume some resources, G Suite services, resources like calendars, drives, and so on, and they ask for domain-wide delegation. So again, at a company like ours, at scale, it means accessing the whole domain. So we would like more granular things like this. Another tool could be great. We discussed before sensitive accounts. Super admin accounts is one category, but we have also all the dedicated admins. And we have customized role. And one of the problems is that some they use some roles, but sometimes they don't use it. It would be so great to have a tool that could say like, hey guy, now you are not using this customized role for now 3 months. Okay, this is the list. We would like to get rid of this custom role because it's, well, you don't need it. It's the least privilege. And we don't have such a tool, and it would be great to have that. Okay. So I have, okay, I let Ryan talk, but I have some other idea like management API. I mean, I mentioned we have 1,000 organizational units, okay? And it's quite difficult to have an idea about the security, how it has been implemented just in one click. So it would be great to have a report right away to say, oh, guy, look, your configuration is exactly like this. Should I carry on, Andrew, or should I give the microphone?
I think we need to hear from, thank you. I think Ryan and Red, and I can't make any commitments to anything new, but please watch out for the betas.
So I'm looking forward to being able to share Drive data with external non-Gmail or G Suite partners. That's really exciting for us. We do work with tons of vendors that force us to use another service, which will remain nameless, but we are still utilizing 2 different file sharing services, which causes some confusion within the company on what to store where. Past that, MDM, the functionality for like Chrome OS, Android, iOS, fantastic. Endpoint verification is a thing for Windows and Mac. I'm really excited to see where that goes down the line. If we can, kind of consolidate the other management tools that we're using currently, which will, I guess, also remain nameless. It would be great to do that all from within G Suite because it does it really well. Yeah, that's I think cool. The only 2 things I want right now.
Awesome, thank you. Red?
Yeah, on my end, actually, they've said a lot of requests.
Some great ideas.
But yeah, particularly is the context aware. I know it's in beta already. I haven't tested one out, but context aware, basically it's more of, and I've actually, one of the questions here was locking down specific access to a specific location, whether it's through an IP or a specific time. That would be great because we have a lot of temporary employees as well, which we want to make sure that they're only using it on a specific location. Another thing, it'd be, I guess, more on the Drive as well, on Team Drive. Yeah, that's one of the particular concerns because we are collaborating with different Google G Suite users. So we want to make sure that we can still collaborate with them, but at the same time the files would remain with us and will not be, destroyed whatsoever once the person is, cut out from our organization. That's particularly, yeah.
Great, thank you.
One point is related to extension also. Chrome extension.
Yes.
We should have a, yeah. It's an issue for us because users, they use them a lot and we have no visibility. If we could have a tool to have more, say, easy to whitelist, things like that,